For this week's podcast on English.com, we have the third in our series of Life Before the Internet. And for this week, we're talking about correspondence.
Yes, letters. Richard, can you remember, when was the last time you wrote a letter?
I can't remember exactly, but I think it must have been writing to my mum.
Right.
When we lived in Jordan, which was over 12 years ago. I used to write to her regularly.
Now, you had those special airmail letters.
Yes, it was just a piece of paper which was also the envelope, and it also included the stamp.
It was very lightweight, wasn't it?
It was very light. It was all in one. You just had to fold it up and pop it in the mailbox, and that was it.
I don't even know if they have those anymore.
I'd be surprised.
Now, you mentioned the fact that there was no stamp, or the stamp was included, wasn't it?
Yes.
Because that's a big difference, isn't it, nowadays?
Yeah, you don't buy stamps, do you? Even if you have anything to send, you just go to the post office. Because I remember as a small boy, I loved collecting stamps from everywhere. But no longer. So what about you then, Jackie?
Well, what I do remember doing is sending regularly postcards to my parents.
Oh, yes.
When we were on holiday, or of course just the different places that we were working in.
Definitely. I think you can still buy postcards, can't you?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because postcards are still for sale. We see them, but I don't send postcards anymore because everything has changed. We use Facebook with an up-to-date regular account of what we're doing on our holiday.
Yes, exactly.
It's interesting because I don't write to my father at all anymore, letters or postcards. We communicate completely with video calls.
But you do send him a Christmas card, though.
Yes. Now, I do remember when I moved to live and work in Africa, which was for 5 years, I only wrote to my parents and a very few close friends, maybe 5 or 6 people.
So do you think then you lost contact with people then because correspondence was so time-consuming?
I think so, but I think it's because I only wrote to the people who were really important to me. So I think that nowadays I correspond with people more regularly.
Yes, it's much easier as well. And there's more people you correspond with.
Also with people who in the past, perhaps they wouldn't be in my address book.
I'm in correspondence now, actually, with people I knew at primary school.
Right.
And I haven't seen them almost since then, 40 plus years ago.
So it's completely different, Richard, now, isn't it, from when we were at school, when we were younger. Do you think it's all for the better now?
Yes, definitely, I think so. Because we live fairly separate from a lot of our friends here, and it's so easy to keep in contact with everybody.
Yes, I think I agree, Richard. It's really nice, isn't it, being in touch with friends from the past and keeping in everyday contact with our families. But I do wonder whether the amount of time we spend on social media is probably more than the letter writing we did in the past.
Idioms and expressions. Pop it in the mailbox. Meaning, to quickly put something in the mailbox. Example, once I finished writing the letter, I just popped it in the mailbox and waited for a response. Lost contact. Meaning, to stop communicating with someone. Example, after moving to a new city, I lost contact with most of my old friends. Up to date. Meaning, to be current or updated with the latest information. Example, I like to keep my social media accounts up to date with everything I do on vacation. Time-consuming. Meaning, something that takes a lot of time. Example, writing letters was so time-consuming, it's no wonder people switched to emails. All in one. Meaning, refers to something that combines multiple functions or elements. Example, the airmail letter was great because it was an all-in-one solution, letter, envelope, and stamp. Welcome back to the English Daily Podcast, where we explore fascinating stories behind the words and phrases we use every day. I'm your host, Liv Morgan, and today, we're diving into the origins of two words that are not only common in English but have traveled across the globe, orange and tea. We'll uncover how these words evolved through trade routes, cultures, and languages. Stay tuned as we journey through history, exploring how these everyday words came to be.
Podcastandenglish.com, we're talking about the origins of two very common English words.
Yeah. So, in general, the word for the fruit orange has three forms, variations of those forms. So you have either the word orange, Portugal, or applesin.
All right, Jackie. So where does the actual fruit come from then?
Oranges, like all citrus fruits, come from Asia, South China, North India. And it was the Arabs who were the first to trade, to import the oranges into Europe. And the Arabic word for orange is naranj.
Okay, so it's arancia in Italian, naranja, is it? Laranja in Spanish, orange in French, and of course, orange in English.
Exactly. No, but then what's interesting is the Portuguese, also big explorers and merchants, they brought the sweet orange to Europe. So many languages call the fruit after them. So in Turkish, it's portokalo. Right?
Portobello?
In Bulgarian, it's portakal, right? And in Arabic, for the sweet orange, it's bortukal. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
Wow. But you also mention applesin.
Yes, that simply means apple from China, and it's used in countries like Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Russia.
Now, I've got a drink that only, as far as I'm aware, has two words.
Right.
It's tea or cha, possibly chai as well.
Yeah, variations of those words, right?
And again, it's to do with the origin of the word and the trade routes.
Right.
Okay, so obviously tea again comes from the Far East and China. Both words actually come from the Chinese, but obviously, as you know, they've got different dialects. Now, chai is produced in one dialect, and that one came through the Silk Road, okay, through the land routes to Russia.
Through Central Asia, then?
Central Asia to Russia and Eastern Europe, so they all say chai.
Okay.
But the Brits, of course, we call it tea, and that comes from the Dutch, and they got it from the coast of China, from South China, where their dialect, they used the word tea or tea.
Okay, so what route did the Dutch take then?
Well, there was the sea route through Indonesia, India, Southern Africa, and Europe.
Okay, so that's why they all say tea there.
Indeed, and that's why we say tea in most of Europe.
Why is it therefore here in Portugal it's an exception? They don't say tea.
They say cha, because obviously the Portuguese were great traders as well, and they got their tea or chai from Macau, where they use the word cha.
It's interesting, isn't it, Richard? Because people complain that nowadays globalization is a new concept and everything is becoming very similar throughout the world. But this is such a good example of two words, the tea or the cha, which nearly everyone uses. And that's because hundreds of years ago, the goods were either spread overland or traded by seafaring Europeans.
And actually, I do think there is one word which everyone uses throughout the world.
Ah, yes.
Well, I've certainly never been to a country where it was not used, the word taxi.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the English Daily Podcast, where we explored the rich history behind the words orange and tea. Before we go, let's take a moment to break down some interesting idioms and expressions connected to these words.
First, the phrase a bitter pill to swallow
can be linked to the tea drinking culture. Tea especially green tea, was originally quite bitter in taste, and this idiom refers to something unpleasant or difficult to accept, much like drinking unsweetened tea might have been for some.
Next, spill the tea.
Is a modern expression that means to gossip or reveal secrets. It shows how tea has become a social activity associated with sharing stories or juicy details, just like sitting down for a chat over a cup of tea.
4. Orange.
We often hear the expression to compare apples and oranges, which means to compare to very different things. This reflects how oranges, though part of the citrus family, are distinct from apples, making any comparison between them unreasonable or unfair.
And finally, the phrase, not my cup of tea.
Is a classic English idiom meaning something that is not to someone's liking. Just like different people prefer different types of tea, not everything suits everyone's taste.
I hope these phrases add a little extra flavor to your English vocabulary. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. I'm Liv Morgan, and this is the English Daily Podcast, where every word has a story.
Welcome back to the English Daily Podcast. Today's episode is all about spreading positivity, even when the world feels gloomy. We'll be talking about small yet meaningful ways you can cheer others up, and yourself too. Whether it's donating blood, offering a helping hand, or planting a tree, these little actions can make a big difference. So stick around as we explore some simple yet powerful ideas with my co-host, Richard.
Everything feels gloomy. The weather is gloomy, the news is gloomy.
So for this week's podcast on English.com, we're looking at little ways to cheer others up and yourself.
So what do we mean, Richard, exactly?
Well, things you can do. For example, become a blood donor. It's a fairly easy and painless thing to do, costs nothing, yet can make a huge difference.
Yeah, and they say each donation can save up to 3 lives. So you'll feel better about helping others, and the hospital and patients will be very thankful.
Another thing you can do is offer to babysit. If you have friends or family that don't get out because of young children, offer to look after the kids for an evening so the parents or parent can have a night out.
Or even to offer to look after them during the day as well. Take them to the park. So again, the parents can have some time to themselves. Something else to donate, Richard, is food. Sadly, food banks in the UK anyway have become a vital source of food for many people who find the cost of living too high. So you can buy extra tins of things and drop these off at a food bank.
Yes, and also supermarkets often have schemes, don't they? Sometimes you can leave food at the checkout, for instance.
Yeah.
You can also volunteer. Now, this can cover a whole range of things, but there are plenty of organisations that need people to help.
Yeah, working in a charity shop, for example, volunteering to garden for those with physical disabilities.
You can even just go and chat to people or read to people in old people's homes.
I think also, Richard, give away the things you no longer need. Not worthless things, but like tools, for example. Tools that work, but you no longer use.
Yes, an old computer, sewing machine, gardening tools, things like that.
Find an organisation that could use them.
Talking about gardening tools, you could also plant a tree. So more and more evidence shows that trees are a good way forward of controlling climate change. Not just by providing shade and reducing carbon dioxide, but they are a source of food and shelter for so many creatures. And if you have a small plot of land, plant a small one.
And if you don't have any land, contribute to a tree planting scheme near you. Especially if you live in a town, they can lower a city's summer temperature by up to 8 degrees centigrade.
And also, in general, you can keep a lookout for little ways to help strangers.
Yeah.
For instance, giving up your seat on a bus or a train.
opening the door to someone who would like you to do that. I'm thinking like a parent with a pram, for example, or helping to carry the pram upstairs.
You could also give a lift to someone. We live in a rural area and you often see someone carrying their heavy shopping back from the market. Even if it's only a kilometre or two, that can be a great help, especially for old people.
Yeah, so I think what we're saying, Richard, is a friendly "can I help?" makes
Idioms and phrases explained.
Fairly easy and painless. Meaning, this means something is simple and doesn't cause discomfort or stress. Example, donating blood is fairly easy and painless. You just sit back while they take a small amount of blood. Cost nothing. Meaning, this means it doesn't require money. Example, becoming a blood donor costs nothing, yet it can help save lives. Make a huge difference. Meaning, a small action can have a significant positive impact. Example, by donating a few tins of food, you can make a huge difference for families struggling to afford groceries. Give a lift to someone. Meaning, to give someone a ride in your car. Example, on my way home, I gave a lift to an elderly neighbor carrying heavy bags from the supermarket.
Keep a lookout for. Meaning, to stay alert and watch for something. Example, when you're on the bus, keep a lookout for people who might need a seat, like an elderly person or someone with a child. Brighten someone's day. Meaning, to make someone feel happier or more positive. Example, a simple smile or compliment can brighten someone's day, especially if they're having a tough time.
Plant a tree. Meaning, literally planting a tree, but also used symbolically to represent doing something beneficial for the future. Example, planting a tree in your garden not only improves your surroundings, but also helps combat climate change. Lower a city's summer temperature by up to 8 degrees. Meaning, planting trees can cool cities by providing shade and reducing the heat. Example, by planting more trees, urban planners hope to lower the city's summer temperature by up to 8 degrees, making it more bearable during heat waves. That's it for today's episode of English Daily Podcast. Remember, even the smallest gesture can make someone's day a little better, and in turn, it'll lift your own spirits too. We hope these ideas inspired you to take action and spread some positivity. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.